Hi, everyone. Welcome to the first ever International Academic Center for Taekwondo interview podcast. Today, we will be talking to Dr. Allan Bäck about his new publication, which will be coming out through the iACT press. But first, I'd like to state the purpose of this channel and the organization. Obviously, this channel is here to continue the activities of iACT. We have changed the name from to the International Academic Center for Taekwondo to reflect the new directions the organization is moving, which includes obviously publishing new books on Taekwondo and providing online interview and education opportunities for you, the viewers. We are today going to focus on our newest publication, which is a revised edition of Dr. Bäck's martial meditation. So first, I'd like to introduce the participants. First, Dr. Bäck. His education includes a BA in philosophy from Reed College, and his PhD in philosophy is from the University of Texas at Austin. Dr. Bäck has also spent a lifetime in the martial arts. He has over 50 years of Taekwondo practice, and he currently holds a 7th Dan or black belt in Taekwondo and a 6th Dan in Hapkido. He's been given numerous honors over the course of his academic career. Of course, he's a tenured professor in the Department of Philosophy and Government at Kutztown University, which is located in Kutztown, Pennsylvania, here in the United States. He is also the recipient of the Humboldt Research Award, which is a very prestigious academic award that was bestowed upon him for his outstanding contributions to his academic field. I would also like to take a moment to introduce our newest member of the iACT team, Miss Phoebe Granfield. She is the iACT Director of Media Operations. She's going to be doing the majority of our interview today. Her education is currently a BA in sports coaching from Cardiff Metropolitan University, which she earned in 2021. She is also currently completing her Master's of Sports Science and Exercise in Biomechanics, also at Cardiff Metropolitan University. Martial art wise, she holds a 5th Dan in Taekwondo from the International Taekwondo Federation. And I am John Johnson. I am the Vice President of iACT. My education includes a bachelor's degree in English Literature and Language from Wichita State University, an MS in Education, an MS in Teaching from Southwestern College, and a PhD in Physical Education from Kyunghee University's Department of Sport and Taekwondo. I currently hold a 6th Dan in Taekwondo from the International Federation of Taekwondo, and a 7th degree in Hapkido from the Korea Hapkido Federation, and a 4th Dan from the Guki one. So now I will turn over the interview to Miss Granfield. Miss Granfield.
Thank you. You have just promoted me to 5th Dan.
Did I? I'm sorry. I thought that was in my notes. 4th Dan then.
Right. So, Dr. Bäck, thank you for joining us today. Our primary purpose is to discuss your recent iACT publications. Before we do that, can you please begin by telling us about your academic and Taekwondo histories? So why did you decide to publish with iACT?
Okay, I'll tell you why I decided to publish this with iACT. I started out in Taekwondo, actually in the International Taekwondo Federation. But then the guide went off and I ended up studying with Dr. Daeshik Kim at that time of the World Taekwondo Federation. And to get a Shodan, a first degree, he had the traditional requirement that you had to write a thesis. So I wrote a paper for that. And actually, then he and I published it immediately in a rather top-rate journal. It was called Towards the Western Philosophy of the Eastern Martial Arts, and it's in the journal Philosophy East and West. So we started collaborating together, and we would write various things. Actually, I would mostly write it, and he would comment on it and do the publication business. And the books and articles were rather well received. So the first book was Martial Meditation, and that was a long time ago. That was 30 years ago. So we continued to write things together. There's another book, The Way to Go. And I was at Yongin University around 2000, and I noticed that they were using, this is The Way to Go. This is the book. But I had noticed that what they had done at Yongin, they had translated the book into Korean, into this edition, and were using it as a college textbook. And so I said, Dr. Kim, we really didn't design this as a college textbook. And so we decided then to, maybe we should do something about it. And there was this rather haphazard collection of articles called Background Readings in Taekwondo. And so we took that and revised it, and Dr. Johnson actually edited it, and that came out in iACT called Foundations of Taekwondo. And it is designed as a resource for people, educators, and also Taekwondo instructors and students to get a good background in Taekwondo, both theory and practice. So having started this collaboration business, well, we thought it might be a good idea to update Martial Meditation, seeing as that it was out of print and a bit out of date about some of the sections. And so we start revising and reformatting that. Dr. Johnson was involved, again, heavily in the editing of it. And then that's how we came up with this. But what actually got me started writing this business is when Dr. Kim died around 20 years ago, I rather lost interest in the Foundations of Taekwondo project. So I just let it sit, and I write a lot of other stuff in other areas in philosophy until I ran across iACT with Dr. Johnson and Dr. Juwenka. And then, well, they kind of bugged me a lot, which is good. And so then they got me doing this stuff again. So that's long-winded, but that maybe give you some background.
Thank you for that. So can you tell us about the Daeshik Kim Foundation and about how that came about?
Yeah, okay. Well, I had the idea that it'd be nice to do something in Dr. Kim's memory. And well, if we have all these books, and one way to publish books with regular publishers, and I've published like 10 books, and okay, they give you little royalties and they get most of the money. But I thought it'd be nice really to have a situation where we have a foundation, a tax-deductible foundation registered with the Internal Revenue Service of the United States. So we charge a bit for these books, both e-versions and print versions, and all the money goes to this foundation. In fact, we might have a fund drive coming up soon, and maybe a matching fund drive. So if people would like to contribute to this Daeshik Kim Foundation, the funds will be matched. More on that maybe later. We might get on the mailing list or look at the website. All right, so what would the money be used for? It'd be mostly used to help further the study of people in Taekwondo, academic study Taekwondo mostly. So for instance, help them go to conferences, help them maybe write papers, help them with their expenses for graduate study, things like that. So I thought that would be nice to set this up in his honor. And so that was my idea. And I guess some other people like Dr. Johnson's interested too. So you too, maybe. So that's how it got started.
And to speak a little bit more about that from the iACT perspective, we all of the members of iACT come from a very traditional martial art background where the honoring and remembrance of the people who gave us what we have today and made us the people that we are today. That's a very important aspect of who we are, not only personally, but as an academic organization. So when Dr. Bäck suggested this foundation, and I thought it was fantastic, not only to honor such a very important person, one of the progenitors of academic Taekwondo, but also on a personal level for me, when I was growing up and coming up in the martial arts in the 1980s and 1990s, these books that Dr. Kim and Dr. Bäck published, I mean, they formulated so much of my understanding of what martial arts, and particular Taekwondo and Korean martial arts, were all about. So this has been a huge labor of love and honor and respect for the people who came before us. And as I was going back through and rereading the sections and editing these books, the information that was being written back then is just as true today. And so even though the current edition of martial meditation it's been revised, but there wasn't much updating needing to be done. It's a fantastic textbook. It's a fantastic introduction, but also a deep dive into martial arts. I loved going through it. So iACT Press is dedicated to continuing this type of activity. And once again, we are very proud to say that 100% of the profit of all income from the sales of these books goes into the Daeshik Foundation. iACT is not making a single penny from this.
And not taking expenses off the top the way.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
A lot of charity organizations do that.
Yeah. That's not part of who we are. It's not part of the Daeshik Foundation. This is purely to help further the next generation of Taekwondo scholars in a way that I think few people have even conceived.
Right. Thank you both. Have you finished talking? Dr.
Yes,
John?
ma'am.
Okay. because it looked like as if like you were gonna start saying something else.
Oh, sorry. I'm good. Please continue.
Okay. And so Dr. Bäck, just moving on to martial meditation, why did you decide to do, you might have just kind of covered this, but just to make sure I've covered the question, why did you decide to do a second version of martial meditation, and how does it differ from the first version?
Well, the formatting is certainly different. I was annoyed about the first edition. At the time, they didn't use computer tapes files to do the printing. It had to be camera ready copy, whatever. They had a manuscript that was picture perfect. I mean, it was all no typos, but it got really messed up when I printed it. So there's a lot of typographical mistakes. Not a whole lot, but one particular place. So that was one reason. Another reason is some of the sections about the state of the martial arts today. Well, the state of today is 30 years later, so that needed to be changed. And just it was out of print pretty much. So I had mixed feelings about this book. I didn't remember it very well, honestly, and I thought it wasn't that great. But I started reading it again. It was better than what I remembered it to say. And it's a book that really, not really so much, I'd say it's a textbook for beginners, but also it has a lot of theory in it. It really is philosophy of the martial arts.
Mhm.
And my impression is I would change some things, but most of it stands the test of time. So, okay, so it's reformatted. Some stuff is updated, and typos are out. And the references are updated thanks to Dr. Johnson.
That's good. This is just going off the script slightly, but because I know when I've read it, you've talked about the difference between about what a martial art is and what a sport is and stuff. But now it seems to a certain extent that Taekwondo is almost becoming more of a sport than it was when you wrote the book. So what is your opinion on that?
Well, you're quite right. I mean, one of the things that it doesn't talk about in the book, because it wasn't the case then, is World Taekwondo got into the Olympics. And so the focus, for instance, in Korea, oftentimes is on Olympic sparring. And again, other people like tournaments and so forth. And yeah, they say, well, the main focus is on that Taekwondo sport or martial arts sport. Well, that is true for often the heads of the organizations because they run the tournaments and so forth. But I'll speak about United States, but I could speak about other countries. Better stick to my home turf. So you have some people who do the martial arts competition and they like it. But the majority of people who take Taekwondo, United States, really aren't interested that much in that. I was talking to Mr. King. His son Jimmy won the gold medal at the Olympics. And he was saying, yeah, most of the people I have in my dojo, they're not really that much interested in the competition. They're here for something else. And so, well, if you actually do the demographic surveys of who's interested in Taekwondo for what reason, you actually have more of a strong interest in the so-called traditional martial art than you do martial arts sport. Oftentimes people are rather vague about what they're looking for. That's true. But there's still a mystique about martial arts, and the mystique doesn't come from being a sport. Lots of things are sports, you know, like hockey or like the track and field. If Taekwondo is just a sport like that, what's so interesting about it? And for many people, what interests them about Taekwondo as a martial art is something else. And so this book is really about the something else.
Thanks. And the first book that you published with iACT was The Foundations of Taekwondo. How does martial meditation differ from the Foundations of Taekwondo book?
Fair enough. All right. The idea was, well, the martial meditation is more the theory. And the other one, the way to go, is actually the practice, more practical issues. So it talks about affirmative action. It talks about whether you should have different rank standards for people of different ages and different weight classes, things like that. So that was theory and practice. And again, the Foundations of Taekwondo, that was designed more as a college level textbook, which could also be used as a textbook for people in martial arts schools.
Thanks. And what should readers expect to learn from it?
Well, one thing is to sort of get clear on their motives and get clear on what the traditions are and what the practices actually involve and perhaps are designed to do. Martial arts is a bit like yoga. If you look at Patanjali's treatise on yoga, he talks about the different stages of consciousness you go through as you engage in the yoga practices, which is physical, right? It's these physical postures and stretches and things. But the idea is that the theory is embedded into the practice. Now, in martial arts, in both the training and in the sparring, and even perhaps above all in the forms, the pumse, the theory is embedded in the practice. At least that's a traditional claim. Whether it's true or not, we should be honest about and say we need to figure out whether it's true or not. So the idea is that by just practicing a certain way, regardless of whether you're aware or not, you may end up in certain of the mindsets or the Mushin, the no mindsets that are talked about in these books. So these books actually help you perhaps get more aware of what you're doing and where you're headed, depending on how you practice.
Can you just expand on that about that last sentence that you just said?
Depending on how you practice, it depends on what your focus is. For instance, if you do competition, then one of the things you focus on at elite competition, you can correct me if I'm wrong, is you do peak training, right? So you're going to peak at the time of the competition. That's fair? Okay, that's not very good for self-defense, right? You don't want to have peak training for self-defense purposes, because you don't want to, guy is mugging you at a certain time. No, I'm not at my peak time. You have to come back next week. So the notion is that peak training is something which is geared towards competition and sport, and it's not at all geared towards martial art as a self-defense practice. And again, if you want the martial arts attitudes to be your normal life, as Funakoshi says, your walking stance, your normal stance is your fighting stance, and your fighting stance is your normal everyday stance. If you want that sort of thing, you don't want to say, I just have my competition time over here and my life over there. It's much more holistic. So again, you have to make certain choices about whether you are focused on competition and say peak training, or whether you're interested in something else with other purposes. Now you can do all those things. Obviously, great competitors can be great at self-defense, but at a certain point, it's sort of, you have to choose.
Yep. Thank you. What format is martial meditation available in?
Okay, there is still a few copies of the print version, the old edition, but they are pretty much gone. Currently, there's the e-version. There are some plans to make a printed version, perhaps both paperback and hardback. We have to see first if the demand is there. There's no point in printing up a bunch of books and just having stacked in a room. But yeah, so we're amenable to having also print versions as well as e-versions, although the way things are going in sort of academic presses anyway, everybody is headed more towards the e-version than they are to print versions. Places like Oxford University Press and so forth.
What's happening with my, sorry, something's just gone weird with my computer. Okay, it's gone now, sorry. And where can people purchase your new, or rather the revised version of martial meditation?
Well, it's supposed to be available on the iACT website, maybe Dr. Johnson can say, and we have a person who, actually a Taekwondo person, among other things, who's my also student as a philosophy major. He actually has a website where he's handling the purchasing on the online store. Mm-hmm. You want to say something, Dr. Johnson?
Sure. So regarding the online PDF version, that is going to be available through a link on our website. The website is iACT, Taekwondo.com, but it's iACT Taekwondo.com. So we are, at the time of recording, we are still in the process of figuring out the print versions, and they will be available, I hope, very, very soon. So please check out the website. You'll be able to find the publications and more information about our organization, the Daeshik Kim Foundation, and our other upcoming events.
Cool. Dr. Jordan, do you have any questions for Dr. Bäck? Dr. Bäck?
Okay. And so I guess my one question would be, in your years of experience within Taekwondo, what are the biggest changes you have seen?
People don't work on mechanics very much, actually. For instance, he takes up the side kick. People used to break it down into stages, into the chambering, for example. And my impression is, at least the way a lot of people teach or practice, is they don't do that anymore. They lose the mechanics of the kick. Now, there's a good example in Ms. Banfield about the difference between the sport and the self-defense, because why would you want to chamber and then you twist your back foot on the moment of impact and twist it back to retract? Well, that increases the power a lot. Now, in Olympic sparring, power is not interesting, because you're just trying to get the tag, you're trying to get the score. Well, if you're trying to defend yourself and you tag the person and the person just goes through the kick and wipes you out, well, the power is much more important. It's not who hits first, who hits best. So I think that the mechanics of the techniques have gone down quite a lot. And also, I don't think a lot of people don't much understand what the forms are for. I give you one example. No doubt you guys know this, but in classical Pumse, classical forms, your feet are tracing a pattern on the floor, right? Always are. In a classical form, the pattern of your feet, you're sort of drawing the Chinese character for the name of the form. So a lot of people just don't know that. Am I right?
Yes, sir. Absolutely. So would you mind talking a little bit about Taekwondo academics or Taekwondo studies, where it's come from and where you think it might also go?
Yeah, I'm not sure where it's going to go. There's a lot of stuff that people write and call it philosophy. I'm a little bit picky about what I call philosophy. So there are a lot of studies about biomechanics or peak training and things like that. I know injury rates among different classes of athletes, concussion protocols. There's that sort of material, and that's, of course, useful. And then I'm more interested in the theory, ethical issues, and you might say other sorts of issues. And there's some stuff coming out, not necessarily particular to Taekwondo. It's maybe towards martial arts in general. So I think there's some interest in that. And then there's also interest in Taekwondo history. Udo Munig, for example, I really respect his work on the history of Taekwondo, finally getting some facts into the history and quit telling the mythical stories. So those sorts of things are going on today. Some of it is of better quality than others. I just saw a couple articles that I would not recommend, except maybe to use as an example of what you shouldn't do if you want to learn Taekwondo. But yeah, there's some interest there, and more than I thought, actually, when I started doing this.
So to touch a little bit upon what you just said about Professor Morning's research on the history of Taekwondo, which seems to be a very popular area of research, even more so than the biomechanical studies, because most Taekwondo practitioners are, as you said, aren't so interested in becoming elite athletes, but they are interested in where the art comes from. A lot of your research has touched on the myths pertaining to martial arts. Can you maybe talk a little bit about the importance of myths, because that is part of martial meditations, and a little bit about the history and how the average person needs to kind of balance their understanding of those two areas of research?
You're right. Well, history, like history of Taekwondo, that's a field, that's true, that's history, that's good. And it's good to know the facts. But as far as human beings go, when you have certain myths or certain beliefs and that you think are true, those become cultural facts. And so a lot of the way we maneuver in our lives, we're much more interested and much more influenced by cultural facts than by historical facts. Again, if you look at United States, or you could use Britain just as well, most of the leaders have their warts. They've done some pretty nasty stuff. And well, if you focus on the warts, you miss the greatness of the person. So we get these ideals from the history, which is sort of mythologized. But those ideals perhaps are more important to our lives than knowing the particular facts of what these people actually were like. So in any case, you say, here's the philosophy stuff. Well, the history concerns the fact of what is the case. Well, philosophy, if you're doing, say, talk about what the martial art is, it's not necessarily what the martial art is in fact right now, so much as what a martial art should be. What sort of goals should we have in our practice so as to move the martial arts practices to something better? So the same thing goes on in philosophy of sport. People want to keep saying that practicing a sport improves your moral character. The evidence from psychology of sport is overwhelming that it does not. In fact, it makes your moral character worse. I guess you can measure moral character with MMPI and JPI, with these standardized tests they use in psychology. And so, like, there's some people who say, well, they admit that, and they say, well, that's the way, in fact, it is, but we would like to make sport into something better, way it should be. And you can say the same thing about, say, philosophy of martial arts. You say, okay, you respect the facts. You don't pretend that something's a fact when it's not. But then you still can say, okay, I can see this ideal, I can see this paradigm, and it seems better than what we got right now, or maybe we can improve what we got right now to get there. And so, well, that's what we should do. So that's a value judgment, yes, but then you try to give justification for it.
Excellent.
Just like a follow-up question, because you were saying about how the about like an idealized version of a martial art and stuff. Where exactly would that, whereabouts would like the philosophy and the ideals and the beliefs come for someone to have that ideal?
Well, a lot of times people get it from stories, right? Or you have these fictional biographies of the founder does this and the founder does this, or you have a idealized history of the tradition, or even claims about what a martial artist can do or what profundity a martial artist has. All this stuff may not be strictly speaking true, but it gives you a certain ideal. So often we get the ideal from interacting with other people and what they sort of praise and what they blame. So we get these practices. Now, philosophy is more theory. And so what you do there is you may take these views and analyze them. What are they actually saying? And then you also then look to see what kind of evidence or justification can you give for these claims? Are they just silly, or are they worth taking seriously?
Excellent. Well, thank you very much for your time and for introducing your latest publication and, of course, the Daeshik Kim Foundation. Dr. Bäck, is there anything else you would like to share with us today?
Well, I'm getting kind of old here, and I was thinking about future direction of iACT and so forth. And one idea I had, and I've mentioned it to you guys a little bit already, is maybe have projects where there's no one author or authors, have something like a collective, like Daeshik Kim Collective. Have a book, for instance, where various people write different parts of the book, and maybe you have people editing book for sure, and also doing the quality control. But maybe this way encourage people to be part of the collective and be part of these ongoing projects. So actually, I thought about one. Actually, I have it pretty much partly together, you know, a sort of a collection of articles. I have a dozen articles that I wrote with or without Dr. Kim on sport and martial arts. So I had the idea of doing that and inviting other people to contribute to this too. So things like we sort of do things collectively. We don't have to have individual glory. Excellence is a social product anyway.
Absolutely. And that is something that we are looking forward to working with you on, and involving other young scholars and established scholars on here, hopefully in the near future. Hopefully by at least the beginning of 2013, we might be able to get that going.
If we had time travel.
2023. Sorry, you're right. I think that concludes our interview today. Thank you again, Dr. Bäck and Ms. Granfield. Please like and share this video on your various social media platforms. Also, please consider contributing to the Daeshik Kim Foundation by purchasing Martial Meditations, Foundations of Taekwondo, and all of our future iACT press publications. Residents of the United States can also give tax deductible donations at the iACT website, which is again www.iACT.taekwondo.com, iACT Taekwondo.com. Thank you, and keep watching out for future iACT content coming to you soon at this channel. Thank you again, guys.